Welcome to Happeo Unmuted, the podcast where we speak openly about what it really takes to connect people at work. From internal comms and knowledge sharing to the messiness of change and the rise of AI, we go beyond best practices to unpack what's working, what's not, and what's worth rethinking. Our host, Casey Bolduc, has spent over 10 years in internal comms, building and launching intranets for organizations in telecoms and finance. He now leads client services at Happeo, where he's helped over 120 businesses across the globe create and grow engaging digital workplaces that drive organizational goals and objectives. If you care about how people in your organization share, learn, and adapt, this is your show. And if you're looking for a modern digital HQ, you can find us at happeo.com.
Welcome to Unmuted, the podcast where we explore the messy, brilliant, and occasionally unfiltered world of internal comms, knowledge sharing, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Bourgeault-Trickey from Happeo. Today's guest is Casey Bolduc. Casey is the Director of Marketing and Technology for Ace Solar, based in North Andover, Massachusetts. As a self-described elder millennial with experience in a range of industries from financial services to construction, he takes pride in his unique position to identify and bridge communication gaps between colleagues, teams, and clients of all backgrounds. We're so glad he could join us today on the show. Thanks for joining us, Casey.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. Appreciate it.
You bet. So maybe let's just kick things off with our unmuted moment, if you don't mind. So what's one moment that made you fall in love with the work you do or totally question your life choices?
It's a great question, first of all, and I think a lot of them probably have a little bit of both involved. So as that sort of elder millennial position, like I said, finding myself being able to explain technology to an older generation while helping enable the next generation, I'll say, and then bridging the gap between the two. So yeah, I think those biggest moments of the moments that have paid off for me, I'll say, helping somebody learn something new, enabling them to use a new technology, were probably some of the more frustrating moments, I'd say. That's for the technology side. On the communications and marketing side, I'd say making a switch from a very regimented corporate environment where communications were heavily structured to construction industry where it's very laissez-faire, I'll say. Not too much strategy or structure around it, but trying to bring some structure to it, I'd say, is another one of those moments for sure.
Was there kind of a moment that stood out for you when you initially started working in the construction side of things, where you were like, "Oh, the comms is totally different," or like, "Oh, this kind of thing is going to really work much better here than there," that kind of thing? Like, can you think of anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, the sharp contrast, I think, was the almost shocking, I'd say. I grew up in more of a trade sort of environment, so I understand the communication flow and the tone of conversations and things. So I think it was a little easier for me. Wasn't a shock, I should say, but trying to think strategically around, okay, well, how do I take some of the elements that were definitely helpful in a corporate structure, having communication strategies in place that everybody can abide by. I'd say that getting everybody on board, right? I very much carry that spirit, but there aren't too many marketing and communication voices in the industry, I'd say, as generally speaking. So, trying to be a sort of thought leader for that within the company, I'd say was probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it sounds like you're sort of being the first to sort of introduce formal communication strategy at an organization. That's always definitely hard. But I guess there's a lot of sort of, again, that what do you fall in love with, like being able to kind of really make an impact and see that development must be pretty rewarding as well, right?
And that is the biggest piece, I'd say, right? Looking back for almost 7 years now, and looking back at how things were, kind of when we started, and not to say that it was bad, of course. Like I said, it's communication in its own flavor, but trying to bring in some of those strategic elements to say, well, this is why we do this, and this is why we say things this way, right? Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Maybe we'll switch over to our second segment, the work behind the work. So the question I had was, what's the hardest thing about internal communications that no one talks about?
It's a nice segue too, because I think it's getting everybody on board in a sense. Everybody communicates, right? It's human nature, whether it's verbally, non-verbally, things like that. I think more and more I start to realize that having communication or solid communication as a skill set is something to be proud of, I'd say, more and more. I don't want to say taken for granted, but overlooked. A lot of people just, communication happens regardless whether you're thinking about it or not. So I think the value of or trying to share that value and get others on board with that is definitely hard.
Yeah, well, I can certainly see that too in an industry or in a position where you're sort of building it for the first time, for them to kind of think about it, like the difference between day-to-day communications versus strategic communications, and kind of wrapping your head around that one, right? So
right, and even using the word, I'd say, right, because again, it's happening whether they want it or not. So now it's just thinking about it formally, more constructively, mindfully, if you will.
Yeah, it's like paying attention to air all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. How about this follow-up? So what's a small internal change you've made that has had a surprisingly big impact where you're working?
I don't want to use the same answer over and over, but I'd say formally discussing communications and having constructive conversations around it. Yeah. Again, not that it's not happening. The communication's happening one way or another, but the kind of thought behind when, where, and how, I think, and segmenting those. That's definitely something that's had a big impact for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I kind of look at it like internal journalism. I think you've got a bit of a background there as well. So it's just the idea of like the who, what, when, where, why, and kind of making it a little bit more sort of plain to see as far as the org's concerned. So that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Nice. Maybe we'll switch over to our technology segment. So the question we had here is, what do you see AI shaping how do you see AI shaping internal comms and knowledge sharing? And are we being realistic, or are we being a bit delusional?
Well, as a proponent of delusional optimism, I'd say we are certainly delusional, but kind of have to be that way, right? The dreamer mentality. Keep repeating the word mindful, but I think that's probably the biggest thing. We all need to be a little bit mindful as how we're using it, thinking about it in the future, in the big picture, how things are going to scale out. As far as knowledge sharing, I'd say, it's going to be a huge help we've seen it be a huge help, not to pat Happeo in the back there, but the search functions within their platform and other platforms to sort of, I don't want to say fill gaps in thinking, but almost open users' eyes to the different phrasing of words and how people might save different file names or how things might be referred to, right? In what context. So yeah, I see it being a big benefit for sure. There's part of me that reads a lot of doomsday sort of novels and things like that. Your 1984s and your big brother taking over. So there's an element of, trying to kind of keep it in control and making sure that it's not, I won't say running on its own, but running untethered, I'll say. Mindfully guiding where it's going. From a content development standpoint, I could see a huge benefit of it. I mean, clearly, as someone who operates as a bit of a one-man show and trying to do a little bit of everything, right? Taking a concept and something that I've just kind of thought up and then translating that into some digital form, becoming a little bit easier with these tools, I'll say.
Yeah. So you've already kind of experimented a little bit, or you've started to kind of dive into it a bit with your workflows and things like that. Do you use it as far as your writing is concerned, or are there particular parts of it that you use it more generally than others when in your day-to-day?
So the writer side of me is very tortured in arguing back and forth about how to use that, I'll say.
Yeah.
And it's funny from a sociological or a psychological standpoint, it's kind of interesting to sort of test myself and then run that up against the machine to see what the machine thinks of how I'm approaching something, right? So I've personally toyed with it in that respect. Definitely using it in some workflows. Once I have a template for something, it makes it a little bit easier just to kind of take that information, plug it into the template, I'd say. And then as a company, clearly, I think everybody needs to discuss it on some level. So having to be aware of it, I'd say the amount of adoption in construction might clearly be more in a technology backend data reporting, in that respect. So we're trying to be aware of it, obviously. And for me personally, I think finding ways to enable, I would say, is the best way that I can describe it. Is you have a thought, you want to get something done, create something, bring something to life, like these are tools that can be used to sort of bridge that gap, right?
Yeah, totally. Right on. So maybe we'll switch over to our next segment for spicy takes and soft landings. If you could unlearn one best practice in your field, what would it be?
Trying to hunt everything down myself, trying to do it all, trying to be that one-man show. That sounds like one of those great like interview responses where you're like, what's your worst quality? Well, I tried too hard, but it's more than that. It's that thought process. I grew up on sports, a huge sports fan, and through that can see the parallels and the value of teamwork. And I use a lot of sports metaphors in my day-to-day, and some of them fly over people's heads, but I think generally, right, people know where they're going. But nothing is done alone in the end, right? That everything's done through partnerships, through teamwork, whether formal or informal. If you want to think about, it's an artistic process. Creating something is a byproduct of all of your experiences and every conversation and interaction you've ever had in your life in some shape or form coming to life, right? So at its core, can't do it alone. And I think what I need to remind myself, and thank you for asking this question, because that's going to go for another month, maybe I should be good, but not being afraid to ask for help is huge.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting comparing it with the last, like it's a good answer. And in the comparison with the AI side of things, with that idea, like you couldn't have done it alone. Like all of this stuff that's within AI, and there's of course all this ethical conversation that's going on at the same time, like these sources and all that, of course. But just that idea that we wouldn't have that without everybody else having contributed,
right?
Something that sort of needs to be considered. But I wonder, like from a one-man show perspective, as you said, like I'm curious, maybe thinking back on the AI topic, if you've been already thinking about the idea of things like agent functionality and being able to maybe have somebody who's sort of doing some of that legwork for you in an AI sense, or any of that kind of stuff. Like, are you already kind of thinking about that, or does that sort of seem tempting to you, or is it more of a like you need to kind of keep that human connection thing going at the same time?
It definitely, it all seems tempting, and I think that's the delusional optimist side, is like this is a tool that we can use to better humanity. Period, end of sentence, right? So if there's a way to do that, great. Again, I think there's a huge caveat to that should be guided, right, with a sort of mindful approach, and all tying back to the human element. I think, right, that's the biggest thing I want to hit on, is that at the end of the day, this content or messaging or whatever it is that we're creating lives in the human world. We're perceiving it in the human world, right? So in my mind, if it's all created in that sort of incubator of just the digital world, and there isn't that sort of reference or reality check, I'll say, I guess maybe that's a great way to phrase it. Actually, I'm going to write that down later. But being grounded in the fact that this content or whatever it is living in the human world, and making sure that it resonates or connects or still makes sense, right? I think that's probably the biggest piece right there.
Yeah. As far as your, like, with all this kind of anxiety, I guess is a way of describing, you mentioned like 1984 and things like that coming with it. Have you been finding that there's more of a consideration for sort of like the social side within your communications, or like being able to build up more of the relationship across the teams and creating more of that, sort of celebration of humanity within the group?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's probably if I was going to apply it tomorrow and utilize it in that sense, yes, that would be the biggest piece. Kind of going back to an earlier question, like I had growing up, trade jobs, building fences, right, working on site, so very much familiar with that vernacular and nomenclature, which is not the way that you and I are speaking right now, nor is it something that's generated by any of these AI tools, right? It's more of a, I don't want to say leveled, but sort of middle of the road plane of communication, maybe, that is a good way to describe it, right? Like it's vanilla enough for everybody to sort of understand and appreciate. The colorful side of the communication in our industry is there, whether we like it or not, right? And it's just part of morale and things like that, right? That would be something interesting to see. I think that would be my first approach. Land the plane. Like if I was going to start tomorrow, I'd say well, let's see how you can interpret this form of communication, right? And then finding that middle ground so that you can connect the two.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of probably back and forth amongst the teams and stuff like that.
For sure.
You know, there's different ways to kind of capture that or enable that. But I guess the other one that I think about, because yours is the industry of sort of delivering a product to your clients, right? And so there's sort of like that celebration that goes with that of a job well done and just being able to kind of show off the cool new things that you've sort of built. So I always see that as an opportunity within internal comms of sort of like showcasing those kinds of work or being able to like share lessons learned or things like that with these other team members. And it's always like a, you know, if we can, or like kind of an afterthought sort of thing. Because there's always prioritization and bandwidth and all that stuff going into it, right? It's just a funny thing though, because I think about it, and you mentioned the sports analogies before too, and it makes me wonder, you know, like what is the championship as far as the work that you guys are doing, and how do you kind of instill that into people's mindset of like, you know, every day you're kind of going into that championship game a little bit, if you want to think about it that way, and then do you have that celebration at the end, like you successfully did it, right? So,
right. And so we're doing it. I'd say that happens a little more. The technology side of my brain is starting to take over in the conversation where, right, in the different platforms, there's, I don't want to say it gamifies, but there's an element of with a long, you know, construction project with a long lead time or just a long overall time from start to finish, right? There's a lot that's done along the way that should be celebrated in a sense. Right, the end goal, planting that flag in the end, that sort of flipping the switch moment is certainly the championship, if you will, right? But I think definitely in our mindset, there's plenty more to be done in a sense. So it's almost like, cool, we flipped that switch. Where's the next one, right? How close are we to the next, right?
Yeah, right on. Okay. Maybe let's switch over to our maybe one of our last questions here. So what's one principle or philosophy you try to live by in your work?
So a daily mindset that I've had for quite some time now is like, I want to learn something every day. It's, you know, never stop learning. There's always something to learn. Not only that, if you think you've learned it, I mean, I grew up, I went into elementary school and pagers existed. And by the time I graduated college, there were smartphones and things. Luckily, not videos, you know, when Facebook was around. So I skirted around that. But just that like progression of technology and change, I feel like I've had that mindset of, well, okay, I learned it, but it's going to be different tomorrow. So keep learning another angle, another aspect of it, right? So it's learn something every day and then help somebody else learn something every day. Like I almost feel like it's a personal mission of enablement. So every time I have a conversation with somebody, I'm almost always digging with that journalist mindset of like, well, what's the thing that I can kind of unlock for you before we end this conversation, right? Might be a little self-serving, but it's also one of those things where I just see, right, these tools that we have and everything's being created. There's a mindset that like, oh, it's too much and I don't want to think about it. But within that big mess of chaos is something that could probably, you know, help better your life in some way. My 85-year-old grandmother 2 weeks ago went for a visit. It was just before her birthday, and she kind of just turned in a silence and was just like, you know, I want to be a blogger. And I was like, well, wait a minute, this is coming from the woman, right? We call her all the time. There's no texting back and forth, and like, you know, there's a hurdle here. But immediately, I'm like, well, voice to text. Obviously, we can have great conversation. She was always a great writer. That's where I got a little bit of a knack for it. But allowing her just to open the iPad, and I was like, you see that little microphone button? You just tap that and start talking. Oh, it's amazing. And there's that aha moment of like, we've had conversations. She's, you know, my hands aren't working as good as they used to. Like I can't physically write. And I was like, well, that shouldn't stop you from getting like the thoughts out. Like you're still a writer here. It's the physical act of it, right? Isn't writing. But that one. So helping someone learn something every day, that covered me for a week, because I went back a week later and then she had already written like a half a novel, right? She'd off and running, right? So
that's amazing.
No, I love that.
I think it's funny that you said it was self-serving. It's like your self-serving behavior is helping other people. So I mean, I don't know if you can really
another one of those interview answers where it's like, I want to. I don't know. Am I always the guy that's helping everybody? And then, I mean, this is a slippery slope. All of a sudden, you help everybody, and then everybody comes to you for help. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good to be useful, right? So
No, it's 100%. No, and that's the biggest thing. Right. Everybody's on their mission to like figure out this world around them, right? I'm trying to figure out my own thing. So there's my learn something every day. But if I see an opportunity to help somebody on their, mission to get into their endpoint, then least I can do, I guess, as a fellow human.
Yeah, and I mean, like I've got kids too, and it's like the idea that whenever I want to really understand something, it's like I have to try and teach them something, and that's a good way to be able to kind of like remember it and actually have it stick in my head. So I mean, I can definitely, I think it's a great idea what you've sort of described there, because it's kind of like, again, it might be self-serving, but it's beneficial to others, and so you're able to kind of provide something while at the same time growing, and so it's a great kind of philosophy to have.
Yeah. I think you blew up my spot on the self. That is the self-serving part of it. Is like I can't teach anything to somebody else and help somebody else unless I know it myself and understand it enough to be able to speak it. So, all right, it goes hand in hand. Well, I guess. Yeah.
Yep. It's just a nice thing to think about, like as far as internal comms. It's sort of a
right.
It's a backbone to the whole idea. Is like we're obviously the first ones to learn it, and then we have to kind of think about it and figure out how we're going to explain it to everybody else and get them all on side and get them understanding and excited and all that good stuff, right? So,
and the how is the big piece, right? I think that's finding the right medium for it, making it easier, and that's the sort of like bridging the gap part, right? It's not, as you could tell, can be long-winded sometimes, and my writing tends to be a novel, so I get that. So right, screenshots and highlights and little blurbs and things, right? There's a different method to getting the point across.
Yeah, well, and of course knowing your audience, as you described with your grandma, right? Like
bingo.
Okay.
That's what you're talking to. That's right.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate the chance to have a chat with you here, Casey. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Right on. Well, for those of you out there, if you liked what you heard, rate, review, and follow, and forward it to someone whose quick update meetings always need a translator. Their future self will thank you. If your organization's still on mute when it comes to comms and knowledge, Happeo is here to help turn up the volume. Until next time, keep talking, keep listening, and whatever you do, stay unmuted.